Heart failure. So, what do we mean by heart failure? In literal terms, it means failure of the heart to pump. We all know what is the function of the heart? The function of the heart is to pump out blood by contractions. So, heart failure means the heart is unable to pump or it fails to pump, right? So, heart failure, often called as congestive cardiac failure or congestive heart failure, is a common, usually progressive condition with a poor prognosis. And heart failure is said to occur when the heart is unable to pump blood at a rate sufficient to meet the metabolic demands of the body or the tissues, or it does so only at an elevated filling pressure. So basically it means that heart is not able to perform its normal function of pumping blood to meet the metabolic demands of the body, or it does so at a higher filling pressure, right? And heart failure generally occurs during the end stage of many forms of chronic heart diseases which we have studied till now. And you may be remembering that in the complications of all the diseases that we studied, in the complications, one of the complication, an important complication, was congestive cardiac failure or heart failure or left ventricular failure and so on. What is the etiology of heart failure? As I said, it is the end stage or the end result of many cardiac diseases. And the cause depends upon many things. So as we said that it is unable to pump out blood, right? So when what is the terminology for that? The term is cardiac output. That is, there is inadequate cardiac output by the heart. And what is cardiac output? It is, blood pumped out by the heart per minute. And what does cardiac output depend upon? Remember your physiology. Cardiac output depends upon heart rate and stroke volume, right? And stroke volume further depends upon a lot of things, upon the state of the myocardium, upon the load that is there on the heart, the preload and the afterload, and so on. So if we see the etiology of congestive failure, congestive cardiac failure, it occurs as a due to, first is intrinsic pump failure, that is intrinsic to the myocardium disease, because any disease that affects the myocardium will affect the stroke volume. What is stroke volume? The blood pumped out per beat of the heart. So it could be due to ischemic heart disease, myocarditis, cardiomyopathy, or other metabolic diseases. Second thing, it could be due to the increased workload on the heart. Now, how does the load on the heart increase? The load increases by two ways. One is pressure load and the other is volume overload. The pressure overload occurs when the heart has to pump out against pressure. So that occurs in hypertension, it occurs in valvular diseases, especially aortic valvular disease, chronic lung diseases. And increased volume overload occurs whenever there is an overload of volume. So that occurs in valvular insufficiency or severe anemia. The third cause of category of cardiac failure could be impaired filling of chambers, which may occur due to cardiac tamponade or due to constructive pericarditis. So we saw the diseases could be due to pressure overload, example hypertension, valvular disease leading to pressure or volume overload, or myocardial disease. All these causes will lead to increased workload on the heart. So wall stress, under stress, and the adaptive mechanisms come into play, and that these adaptive mechanisms are characterized by hypertrophy and dilation of the heart. We all know heart cannot undergo hyperplasia, it can only undergo hypertrophy. But this hypertrophy or the adaptive responses that occur, they have a very limited capacity. So after some time, this leads to cardiac dysfunction, which is characterized by inability of the heart to pump out blood, which is heart failure. It may lead to arrhythmias or other things. So congestive cardiac failure is characterized by variable degrees of decreased cardiac output. So when the heart is not able to pump out blood, we say the cardiac output has decreased. Once the cardiac output has decreased, it leads to less tissue perfusion, because due to pumping of the heart, blood from left ventricle enters into the aorta and thus into the systemic circulation, which supplies blood to all the organs of the body. So that is, if the cardiac output is not enough, it will lead to tissue perfusion. This is called as forward failure, right? Failure due to the effects that are after the pumping of the heart, and when the heart is not able to pump out blood, it leads to forward failure. Another thing that cardiac heart failure will lead to is backward failure. That is, because the heart cannot pump out blood, it leads to backing of the blood. So if we take the left ventricle, for example, if the blood cannot be pumped out, the blood is going to be backed up in the lungs, collect in the lungs, and that will lead to congestion in the lungs. That is why this is also known as congestive heart failure. And if it is the right side of the heart, then the backward congestion would be in the right side of the body, right? The venous circulation. Thus, most of the clinical features of the heart failure are either due to hypoxia, which is due to less tissue perfusion, or due to congestion in tissues, which is due to backward failure. So there we can divide it into left-sided heart failure and right-sided heart failure. Left-sided heart failure, most common causes are ischemic heart disease, systemic hypertension, aortic and mitral valvular diseases, and myocardial diseases. And as I said, if the left heart is affected, the morphological and the clinical effects are going to be, due to forward failure, it is going to be hypoperfusion of tissues leading to organ dysfunction. And due to backward collection of blood, it is going to lead to congestion of the pulmonary circulation and stasis of the blood in the left-sided chambers, right? Changes in the, and because of these changes, what happens? The lungs are full of edema, fluid and congestion. So it leads to cough and dyspnea or breathlessness, initially with exertion, later at rest, which are the earliest complaint. And as the failure progresses, it leads to orthopnea and PND. Right-sided heart failure. Now, right-sided heart failures are less common by themselves. Most commonly, the right-sided failures are caused by the left-sided failure. So, left-sided failure occurs, it is followed, because it leads to stasis in the lung, congestion in the lung, increase in pressure in the pulmonary circulation, and that burdens the right side of the heart, and that leads to right-sided heart failure. So all the causes of left-sided heart failure are causes of right-sided heart failure. Pure right-sided, as I said, is not very common and is usually due to any disease affecting the lung. So any primary disease of the lung, which we call as cor P or cor pulmonale, they may lead to isolated or pure right-sided heart failure. Now same, when the right side of the heart fails, the backing of the blood occurs in the right-sided part of the body, that is the organs which are there on the right side. So right-sided heart failure again will lead to initially hypertrophy and then dilation of the right atrium and the ventricle. And here what is affected is mainly the liver. So liver congestion occurs, congestion of hepatic and portal vessels, which may produce many changes in liver, spleen and gut. So liver increases in size, which is known as congestive hepatomegaly because of all congestion. And congestion is mainly around the central veins within the hepatic lobules. So gives an appearance of a nutmeg. This is a nutmeg appearance, alternate darker areas and lighter areas. The darker areas are due to the centrilobular discoloration, hemorrhage and congestion, whereas the lighter areas are due to they are the peripheral areas which are due to fatty change. And this appearance resembles that of a nutmeg, which we call as jaifal in Hindi. So the appearance is like this nutmeg, and that is why it is called as gross appearance is that of a nutmeg liver. Microscopically, if we see, what we will see is dilated central vein, and the sinusoids are also dilated and congested with red blood cells. And this initially this is just congestion. So later, gradually, due to a long-standing congestion, what happens is central hypoxia occurs, and that this produces centrilobular necrosis. And very long-standing, if right-sided heart failure is there, then this will be followed by fibrosis and creating so-called cardiac sclerosis, or extreme cases cardiac cirrhosis. So that is about the liver. So then dilation of the portal vessel. So portal hypertension leads to enlargement or congestion of the spleen, which is called as congestive splenomegaly. That is also increases in weight up to 300 to 500 grams. Normal is less than 150 grams. And this is very highly congested. Then it also affects the cavities. So pleural, pericardial and peritoneal spaces are all filled up due to accumulation of fluid. So effusions occur in all these cavities. Subcutaneous tissues are affected. So right-sided failure has an effect on liver, on spleen, portal hypertension, the cavities and the subcutaneous tissue. What happens in subcutaneous tissue is there is edema of the peripheral and dependent portions of the body. Especially we have a pedal edema or the ankle edema, and this is a hallmark of right-sided heart failure. And generalized massive edema or anasarca may also occur. The clinical features of isolated right-sided heart failure, as I said earlier, are those which are related to the systemic venous congestion and the portal venous congestion. And they mainly include the organs on the right side, the liver, the spleen, that leads to hepatosplenomegaly, peripheral edema, pleural effusion and ascites. Congestion of the kidneys is more marked with right-sided than left-sided heart failure, leading to greater fluid retention and peripheral edema and more pronounced azotemia. Venous congestion and hypoxia of the central nervous system or brain can at times produce deficits of mental function. So that completes our heart failure. And now we will come to the last topic of cardiovascular system, which we will see in very, very brief. So that is the disease of the pericardium. We saw diseases of the endocardium, diseases of the myocardium, and lastly we see diseases of the pericardium. So what is pericarditis? We know it is inflammation of the pericardial layers of the heart. One more thing why pericarditis is important is because pericarditis also leads to retrosternal pain, and this retrosternal pain may resemble the pain of ischemic heart disease, but there is some difference between that this pain gets worse with inspiration and in supine position and improves with sitting position. It radiates to the jaw also, neck also. So that is why many times this may get confused. And pericardial rub is present here, which will not be present in ischemic heart disease. So causes of pericarditis are infections, that is virus, bacteria, mycobacterium, fungal, immunologically mediated rheumatic fever, SLE, post-MI, drug hypersensitivity, and many miscellaneous causes which are also very important, uremia, neoplasia. And so based on morphology, pericarditis is divided into acute and chronic pericarditis. Acute is further divided into serous pericarditis, fibrinous, purulent, hemorrhagic, and caseous. Chronic is again due to tuberculosis, which is most frequent cause, then adhesive pericarditis and constrictive pericarditis. Now these for secondary classification subtypes depend upon the character of the exudate. So first, the serous pericarditis. Common causes are viral infections, which may be due to Coxsackie A, B, influenza, mumps, adenovirus, and so on. Then rheumatic fever, rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, involvement by malignant tumor, which may be CA lung, mesothelioma, TB pericarditis in early stage. Not much accumulation occurs in this type of pericarditis, and usually it resolves with the resorption of the disease. Fibrinous pericarditis is the response of the pericardium by fibrinous exudate, and this occurs in uremia, myocardial infarction, rheumatic fever, trauma, acute bacterial infections. We've already seen in rheumatic fever the bread and butter type of appearance, which was due to fibrinous pericarditis. Purulent or fibrinopurulent pericarditis, this is mainly caused by pyogenic bacteria, which may be staph, strepto, pneumo, and it generally occurs due to direct extension from adjacent some inflammatory focus. So that may be empyema of the pleural cavities, lobar pneumonia, infective endocarditis, or it may occur by hematogenous spread or by lymphatic spread. Hemorrhagic pericarditis causes are neoplastic involvement of pericardium. Now hemorrhagic here means any of the above collections may be present plus presence of blood, and this may be due to neoplastic involvement of pericardium, hemorrhagic diathesis, or tuberculosis. So that is about acute pericarditis. Now chronic pericarditis, as I said, most frequent cause is tuberculosis, and this may occur due to direct extension from a foci of TB, or it may occur by lymphatic spread. And when we open the pericardium, we can see tubercles which are visible on the pericardial surface, and microscopically also granulomas are seen. The second type is the adhesive type, which is due to organization and healing. So this follows any of the above pericarditis, and healing occurs by forming fibrous adhesions called as adhesive pericarditis. And the last is the constructive pericarditis, which is sort of rare kind of pericarditis and characterized by dense fibrous or fibrocalcific thickening of the pericardium. So there is calcification may also be there, leading to mechanical interference in function of the heart. So here, the heart is encased in a thick and dense collagenous scar which may be calcified. This may obstruct the opening of vena cava, leading to obstruction in venous return, leading to right heart failure. Causes of chronic constructive pericarditis are TB pericarditis, purulent, or hemopericardium. So that is about pericarditis. So this completes our cardiovascular system, diseases of heart. Thank you and have a good day.